The drive-thru at Tim Hortons on Dundas Street West had a line 11 cars deep on a Wednesday morning in November, and Kieran Doyle was third from the back, with a cracked phone screen, a termination letter on the passenger seat, and exactly $23 in his wallet. He had been counting since he left the Harvard Street office. Rent was the 14th. Groceries were already running low. The gas tank was sitting at a quarter. He had done the math 3 times between the parking garage and the car, and had not liked the answer any of the 3 times. At the window, the woman in front of him tried to pay with a card that declined twice. She had a coffee, a breakfast sandwich, and a small hot chocolate. She was in her 40s, in a caregiver's smock, her name badge turned sideways. She was going through her purse with the careful, unhurried dignity of a person who had done this before and was not going to let a stranger watch her panic. Kieran rolled down his window. He held out a 20 for her order and whatever that covers for the car behind. The cashier looked at him. He nodded once and looked straight ahead. By the time the woman in the smock turned around to say something, he had already pulled up far enough that there was a car between them. He ordered a medium coffee, black. It came to $2.11. He put the change in the little tray on the dashboard where his daughter Maura liked to keep her hair elastics, and he drove north on Dundas toward the apartment on Symington, rehearsing what he was going to say. He would not say he got let go. He would say things were changing at work and that he was going to take a bit of time to figure out the next step. Maura was 10. She was old enough to understand that grown-ups said one thing when they meant another. She was also, he had learned, old enough to let him have it when she could see it would help him to believe it for one more day. He parked behind the building. He sat in the car with the engine off for long enough that the windows started to fog. He thought about calling his sister in Sudbury. He thought about calling his old union rep. He thought instead about the year Maura's mother had taken a contract in Calgary and how the two of them had spent that winter learning to make soup because Kieran didn't know how to cook anything else. How she had stood on a step stool at the counter, very seriously adding exactly 1 pinch of salt, because he had told her that 1 pinch was the rule and she had accepted this as law. He went inside. Maura was at the kitchen table doing homework, her hair in 2 lopsided braids she had done herself that morning. She looked up. "Hi, Dad. Hi, Bug. How was school? We had a substitute in science. She didn't know what mitochondria were. Did you tell her?" She paused with her pencil. "I was going to. Then I thought maybe she was having a hard day already." He set his jacket on the hook by the door and did not say anything for a moment, because the thing he wanted to say was too large for the kitchen. "That was kind," he said finally. She shrugged and went back to her worksheet. He went to the bedroom, set the termination letter in the top drawer of his dresser under a stack of Maura's old drawings he had never had the heart to throw away, and came back to the kitchen to start dinner. His employment insurance would not clear for 3 weeks. His severance, 2 weeks' pay, would take longer. He had a small line of credit he had not touched since the water heater had gone out in 2021. He ran the numbers quietly while he boiled pasta, and the numbers were not good, but they were not yet impossible. And Kieran had been a site safety supervisor long enough to know the difference between a recoverable situation and an unrecoverable one. After dinner, Maura asked him if they could get a Christmas tree early this year. He said they'd see. She said that meant yes, but not yet. He said she was too smart for her own good. She said that was also a yes. They watched 20 minutes of a nature documentary about corvids. She fell asleep against his shoulder on the sofa, and he carried her to bed and sat for a while in the dark of the hallway, after, listening to the sound of the upstairs neighbor's dog walking back and forth across the hardwood. He had not cried when he got the letter. He had not cried in the car. He sat on the floor of the hallway with his back against Maura's door and did not cry then either, but it was a close thing, and it was a long night. Renata Sabo went back to the Tim Hortons on Dundas Street 3 days later. She had thought about it on and off since Wednesday, and told herself she was not thinking about it, which was a lie she was used to telling herself about things that mattered. She asked the morning cashier if she remembered a man, late 30s, dark coat, had paid for the woman ahead of him and the car behind. The cashier was a young woman named Priya, who had in fact remembered, because people did not usually do that on a Wednesday. "He paid cash," Priya said. "I don't have a name, but I noticed his car. There was a sticker on the back, one of those construction safety logos, steelwork or something." Renata thanked her, left a tip she could not really afford, and went back to her car. She was not a person who usually did things like this. She was a structural engineer who had grown up in Hamilton and moved to Toronto at 26 to work at Strand and Morrow, and she had been running the company's infrastructure division for the last 4 years, and she had learned in those 4 years that following up on strangers who had been kind to her in drive-thrus was not how she was meant to spend her mornings. But she had been having an unusually bad week, and the $20 had come at a moment when she had been sitting in her car telling herself she was fine, and she was not fine, and the stranger with the cash had been the only person who had treated her like a person that whole day, including the people she worked with, which was its own problem she was not ready to look at directly. Her assistant, a precise young man named Oliver Blatch, found the sticker inside of an afternoon, independent safety consultants, registered to a firm called K. Doyle Site Safety, which had one employee, a Kieran Doyle, who held a National Construction Safety Certification and had until 9 days ago been the senior site safety supervisor for a mid-sized infrastructure firm called Farview Group. Laid off, Oliver said. Part of a restructuring. Renata looked at the screen for a moment. Don't do anything with that, she said. She meant it when she said it. She did not mean it by the following Tuesday. She found the business address, which was also a residential address on Symington Avenue, and she drove there on a Tuesday evening after a long day she did not want to examine too carefully. She knocked on the apartment door on the second floor and stood in the hallway with his $20 folded the same way it had been folded when he put it down on the counter. Kieran opened the door and went very still. She held out the bill. I've been trying to figure out how to do this without it being strange, she said. It's already strange, he said. But that's okay. She told him she'd seen the footage at the drive-thru. She told him she had tracked down the sticker on his car, which she could hear sounded worse out loud than it had in her head. She told him she wanted to return the 20 and say thank you in a way that was more than leaving a review online, which she had also done. He looked at the bill and did not take it. It was a gift, he said. It was $20 you probably needed. I gave it. That makes it a gift, she did not insist. She folded the bill and held it at her side. She had been about to say good night and go, which would have been the sensible thing, when she heard a voice from inside the apartment. Dad, can I have a glass of water? 1 second, Bug. She looked past his shoulder. A child's jacket hung on a hook by the door. A pair of small boots, one tipped over, a kitchen table with a half-finished drawing on it, colored pencils still out. On the shelf beside the door, she could see a stack of binders, the kind she recognized from job sites. The top one had a tab sticking out with handwriting on it. Farview Pays 3, Tunnel Approach. She knew that project. She had designed the drainage system for the eastern section of that tunnel. She stood in the hallway for exactly 4 seconds and did not change her expression. She said good night. She was sorry to have interrupted his evening, and she went back down the stairs. She sat in the car for a long time. In the morning, she called Oliver and asked him to pull Kieran Doyle's full safety record from the public registry. Oliver pulled it. She read it twice on her phone in a parking lot on Front Street. Clean record. 11 years, 0 lost time incidents across 4 major projects, 1 commendation from the Provincial Safety Board, 1 paper self-published through a trade journal in 2019 on cascade failure in tunnel ventilation systems during phased construction. She had read that paper. She had not known the name of the person who wrote it. She sat in the parking lot for another 10 minutes. Then she drove to the office and did not look at the paper again for the rest of the day, which was not the same as not thinking about it. He called the number she had left on a business card tucked under his door. Wednesday morning, a card he had not noticed until Maura pointed it out before school. There's a card, she said. He looked at it. The name on it was Renata Sabo P. Eng, Vice President of Infrastructure, Strand and Morrow. He sat with the card for a long time. He called at noon from the kitchen, standing at the window that looked out over the small stretch of yard the building shared with the house next door. She picked up on the second ring. She asked if he had time to meet. She named a coffee shop on King Street West. Nothing fancy, 11 o'clock Thursday. He said he'd be there. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a table near the back with both hands around a mug of tea he hadn't started yet. He stood when she came in, which she did not expect. She sat down across from him. She did not waste time. Strand and Morrow has a project, she said, that is in trouble. She laid it out without hedging. The Morrison Street rail corridor, a ventilation redesign that had been flagged by the city's independent review board 6 weeks ago. Their lead safety consultant had left the firm in October, before the flag had even come in, and the replacement they'd brought in had submitted a compliance report that she had read twice and did not trust, and neither had the city's reviewer, who had sent it back with 17 questions. She needed some who understood cascade failure protocols in phased tunnel construction at a level deep enough to rebuild the compliance case from the ground floor, not patch the one that already existed. She had 2 weeks before the city's next review window. "I know what's in the Farview Phase 3 binders on your shelf," she said, "and I've read the ventilation paper." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not here because you gave me $20, she said. He drank his tea. "I'm a site supervisor, Miss Sabot. I'm on site at 6 in the morning. I'm home before my daughter gets off the school bus. I do that on purpose. I'm not asking you to come on site. I'm asking for 3 weeks of consulting. You work from wherever you need to work, your hours, your pace. $55,000, project-based contract, your name on the technical annex only if you want it there. Non-disclosure on both sides." He looked out the window at the street. A streetcar rolled past, full of people going somewhere. "I left consulting," he said, "not because I failed at it, because there were other things that needed me more." She did not lean forward. She did not push. She pulled on her coat. "I didn't come to you because you had a good safety record," she said. "I came because of the woman in the drive-thru. If that man and the one who wrote the 2019 paper are the same person, I'd like to work with him. If they're not, I apologize for taking up your morning." She put a 20 on the table. He noticed her pause before she found it. He noticed she'd had to look. She caught him noticing. "3 months ago," she said, "I left a contract in Vancouver without cashing the last check because it felt wrong to take money for a job that had gone sideways. I've been very careful since. I don't usually carry cash." She left. He paid for both their drinks with the coins from the bottom of his coat pocket, the way a man pays when he is being honest with himself about things, and he drove home and did not say a word about it for the rest of the afternoon. Maura, over dinner, asked him if something was wrong. He said no. She said he had his thinking face on. He said that was different from something being wrong. She considered this for a moment. "Sometimes it is, though," she said. He looked at her for a long beat and did not answer. That night, after she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and opened the public database of city infrastructure filings. He found the Morrison Street rail corridor. He found the compliance flag. He found the 17 questions from the city's independent reviewer, which were not, as it turned out, 17 small questions. They were 3 large problems wrapped in procedural language, and he understood all 3 of them, and he understood exactly why the replacement consultant's report had not answered them, and he understood what it would take to answer them properly. He closed the laptop. He thought about the ventilation paper. He had written it in the spring of the year Maura's mother had moved to Calgary, in the evenings after Maura was in bed. He had written it because 2 years earlier he had watched a junior crew on a site in Brampton nearly get killed by a pressure differential that the safety manual had not anticipated, and no one had written the thing down anywhere that anyone could find it. And he had thought if he wrote it down, maybe next time there'd be a document someone could point to. He had not thought of it as a career document. He had thought of it as a thing that needed to exist. He opened the laptop again. He typed Morrison Street Rail Corridor Ventilation Failure Scenarios. He read for an hour and a half. The shape of the problem came together the way problems do when you've been carrying the pieces of them without knowing it. Not all at once. More like a fog lifting in patches until suddenly you can see the whole field. He did the math, not the professional math, but the human math. 340 workers on the site at peak phase. A ventilation failure during a shift change in the tunnel approach. The cascade he'd written about in the paper, but at twice the scale and with the added variable of rail infrastructure that didn't exist in the Brampton case. He had written the paper because a crew in Brampton almost didn't come home. He sat at the window for a long time after he closed the laptop. He called her number at 7 the next morning. She picked up before the second ring. "I'm not saying yes," he said. "I'm saying I looked at the city's 17 questions and I want to understand what your current consultant said about the third one." There was a small silence on her end. She said, "I'll send you the report." She sent it in 11 minutes. He read it while Maura ate breakfast and asked him why he was making his concentrating face at his phone. Because someone gave the wrong answer to a hard question, he said. Can you fix it? He set the phone down and poured her orange juice. Maybe, Bug. I'll let you know. He said yes on a Sunday. He said it quietly to the phone standing in the kitchen while Maura slept in. She said, thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, she said. I know. Thursday, 9 o'clock, I'll text you the address. She sent the address at 7 that morning. The Strand and Morrow office on Bay Street, a floor he'd never been to, a boardroom with the kind of view of the lake that reminded him he had been a long time away from rooms like this. Renata was already there when he arrived. So was a man in his late 60s in a good suit and reading glasses on a cord around his neck, who stood up when Kieran came in. Mr. Doyle, I'm Elliot Strand. My name's on the building. Kieran shook his hand. I've read your ventilation paper, Strand said. I read it when it came out and I read it again last week. We should have hired you 4 years ago and didn't, and I'm choosing not to be sorry about that because it would be a waste of both our time. We're glad you're here now. He sat back down with the particular economy of a person who had run a company for 30 years and had learned which words were necessary and which ones weren't. Renata pushed 3 folders across the table: full compliance history, city correspondence, her own notes on the reviewers' questions, handwritten, dense, organized with small colored tabs she had placed with the precision of someone who had been doing this a long time. He read for an hour and 40 minutes. He did not make notes. He turned pages at uneven intervals and stopped twice to look out the window at the lake, which was gray and flat and wide in the November morning. When he closed the 3rd folder, he set it on top of the other 2 and looked up. Your drainage flow model for the eastern approach is wrong. Renata did not move. Not the design, he said. The model used to run the safety simulations. Whoever parameterized it used the wrong soil permeability coefficient for that section of the corridor. The drainage behaves correctly in the model. It won't behave the same way in the ground. Strand took his glasses off. That's a foundational error, he said. Yes, Kieran said. The good news is it's an error in the simulation, not in the physical design. The drainage system itself will likely perform. But the compliance case has to be rebuilt using the corrected parameters, because right now it's being defended with numbers that don't match what's actually in the ground. Renata said, very quietly, how long? He had already been counting. If I start Monday, he said, and you give me access to the original site survey data, I can have a corrected model in 8 days. The compliance annex takes another 4. You'll have something to put in front of the city reviewer by the end of the 2nd week. Elliot Strand put his glasses back on. Tell me what you need, he said. He came in early every morning through the side entrance on Melinda Street and took the elevator to the 14th floor, to a small office with no nameplate on the door that Renata had set aside without explaining to anyone who it was for. He was out by 3:30 every afternoon. He was home before Maura's school bus reached the corner of Symington and DuPont. What he found in the soil survey data was worse than he had expected and not as bad as it could have been. The permeability issue ran through 40 meters of the eastern approach, which was a specific and addressable problem if you knew where to look. The previous consultant had been using the regional average. Kieran used the borehole records from the site itself, which told a different story, and ran the drainage model again, and the results were what he had expected, which was to say, survivable, but not on paper. On the 5th day, he called Renata from the office. I need the original contract with Marcroft Safety, he said. The one that specified what simulations they were required to run. She sent it within the hour. He read it once. They were never required to use site-specific permeability data, he said when he called back. So the error is ours, she said. Not theirs. The error is in the specs. Whether it's yours depends on who wrote the specs, a silence on her end. I wrote the drainage specification, she said. He did not say anything for a moment. I know, he said finally. Another silence, she said, how bad he thought about it. Not bad enough to stop the project, he said. Bad enough that you're going to need to be the one to tell the city reviewer before they find it themselves. A self-reported correction carries a different weight than a discovered one. She said nothing for several seconds. I know, she said. I know that. She reported it to the city reviewer's office the next morning. She called Kieran afterwards from a parking garage on Adelaide, and her voice was steady and professional, and he understood, from having heard a voice like that before in a different year in a different city, that the steadiness was costing her something. He said, you did the right thing. She said, I made the error in the first place. He said, those aren't the same problem. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I'll call you when they respond." She called 2 days later. The city reviewer had responded with something Kieran had not expected, and that Renata had not allowed herself to expect either. They had commended the self-disclosure. They were prepared to accept the corrected compliance annex as a complete response to the outstanding flag, contingent on a third-party review of the full drainage model, which Kieran would conduct and sign off on, a detail the reviewer's letter had specified by name, which meant someone at the city had read the ventilation paper. He read the letter twice, then he called her. "You're going to be okay," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Oui," she said. He sat with that for a second. "Oui," he agreed. The completed compliance annex was submitted on a Tuesday at 4:15 in the afternoon, 14 days after he had first walked into the boardroom on Bay Street. Renata sent him a text that said submitted and nothing else, and he was in the kitchen making pasta when he read it, and he told Maura they were having a celebration dinner. She looked at the pasta. "It's the same pasta," she said. "It's celebration pasta. What are we celebrating?" He thought about how to say it. "Someone did something hard because it was the right thing to do," he said, "and it worked out." She considered this seriously. "Can we have garlic bread too?" He found half a baguette in the freezer. "Yes," he said. They had garlic bread. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in December, Renata Sabo called him at 8:30. "There's something I'd like to discuss in person," she said. "Can you come in tomorrow?" He came in. She was in the boardroom, and Elliot Strand was there, and a third person he had not met, a woman named Caroline Firth, who turned out to be the chair of the firm's board. They offered him a position, not a consulting contract, a permanent position. Director of Safety and Infrastructure Compliance. They had been trying to fill for 2 years, a role that, Strand explained without any wasted words, had gone unfilled because they had not been able to find someone who understood both the engineering side and the field side in the way that the role required. Kieran sat with it for a moment. "I have a condition," he said. "Name it," said Strand. "I'm at my daughter's school bus stop by 4 o'clock every day." Strand looked at him. "That's not a condition," Strand said. "That's a scheduling note." He signed the offer letter that afternoon, in the small office on the 14th floor, with a pen Renata handed him that had a cap she'd been chewing the end of, which she seemed to realize only when she handed it over, and which made her press her mouth together in a way that was not quite a smile and not quite an apology. He didn't say anything about it. He signed on the chewed pen line and handed it back. The Friday before his first official day, a manila envelope arrived at the apartment on Symington Avenue, no return address. Inside was a single card in handwriting he recognized by now. "Drive-through on Dundas, November 5th. You should know I still have the receipt, nothing else." He set the card on the kitchen table and looked at it for a while. Maura came home from school, dropped her bag, looked at the card, and then looked at him. "Is that from the lady with the $20, she asked. He had told her. Not all of it, but the shape of it, the way you tell a 10-year-old the shape of something real. He said yes. She said, "Is she a friend now?" He thought about it. "Something like that," he said. "She's nice," Maura said, as if she had personal knowledge of this, which she did not. Then she picked up her bag and went to hang it on its hook by the door, and he sat at the table a little longer looking at the card, and then he got up to start dinner. His first morning as Director of Safety and Infrastructure Compliance at Strand & Morrow, he arrived at 7:50, 10 minutes before anyone else on the 14th floor, and found a paper cup of tea from the shop downstairs sitting on his desk with a post-it note that said, "Earl Grey, no sugar." I asked Oliver. He stood there in the good November light with the cup in both hands. The tea already the right temperature, which meant she had timed it, which meant she had been watching the clock, which meant something he was not going to name on a first official morning in an office where the nameplate on the door still said nothing at all. He sat down. He drank the tea. Outside the window, the lake was the color of pewter again, wide and cold and very still, and the city was doing the particular quiet thing it does on early winter mornings before it remembers to be loud. And Kieran Doyle sat in a chair with his name not yet on the door, and thought about a woman at a drive-through counter who had tried a card that didn't work and had not let her voice break, and a man who had put down $20 and walked out, before anyone could make it into a moment. He had not known then that those were the first two people in the story. He knew it now.